Welcome to the Touchdown Labs Center for Touchdown Research. You are with your mad scientist today, and I'll be walking you through a quick game breakdown of the Dallas Cowboys that are facing the Baltimore Ravens at home this Sunday at 4:30. Now, last year's matchup, 2020's matchup with the Cowboys and the Ravens actually walked away with that one 34-17. Now, let me mention here that before we get into the offense and defense, that was a game that Micah Parsons was not a part of. So, Dallas is 1-0 going against Baltimore, who's 2-0. What does this come down to? This comes down to attitude and adversity. Baltimore has not started a season 0-3 since 2015. And when they did that, they finished their season 5-11. So this game is going to come down to who has the adversity to come off of a loss. And the Cowboys are showing that they do with history on their side. They're 12-2 following a loss, ranking actually first in the NFL, with the Ravens not having any of these stats because really they haven't started a season this poorly in quite some time. So the number one question is here, who's going to be able to battle through that adversity? Is it going to be the Dallas Cowboys defense, who gave up over 40 points at home 2 times in a row and lost their 16-0 home streak? Or is it going to be the Ravens, who are likely going to miss the playoffs if they start 0-3 and have a huge hole to climb in the AFC, which is looking like the stronger division in football? So, a couple of things I want to focus on before we get into specifics. Mike McCarthy versus John Harbaugh. Mike McCarthy is an offensive-minded head coach. John Harbaugh is a defensive and special teams head coach. So they'll be going up against quite a battle this weekend. I don't think Baltimore will present the same problems that the Saints did for the offense. There's a reason for that. Ravens have 3 new starters on the O-line, and that's quite a bit here. I know everyone's looking at Dallas with 2 of the rookies on the O-line. They have Tyler Guyton there at left tackle. They have Cooper Beebe at center, and that's a huge feat to conquer. Now, these are 2 premier O-linemen that the Dallas Cowboys are starting. The problem with the Ravens is that these are not premier O-linemen that they're starting in place for the 3 starters that they lost last year. Likely a lack of talent there at O-line, which is leading to Derrick Henry not being the Derrick Henry, King Henry that we're used to. And a couple of things that I heard from the coaches when listening to their pressers, specifically Mike McCarthy, I need to coach better. Not sure if he's taking any blame there from Mike Zimmer or if he's going ahead and taking accountability for his team. I've also listened to Micah Parsons' podcast this week. He is emphasizing that he needs to be a better leader on the team. He needs to go ahead, hold himself accountable, hold his team accountable so they can come through with a win this week. Fantastic things to hear. Let's see what happens on Sunday. I'm hearing the same kind of sentiments coming from the Baltimore Ravens locker room. Their coaches and players saying that they should not be starting 0-2, which is, a reasonable take to say, but they are there now. So what does that come down to? What does that come down to our viewers and for all the fans in the NFL? Guys, this has game of the year implications. I know we're in week 2, but Ravens starting 0-3, that could potentially lead them to missing the playoffs. And with the Cowboys going 1-2, that could potentially lead them to being a wild card team going into the playoffs as well. We all know how much home field advantage matters, and this really all starts in the first couple of weeks of the season. So I'm putting this for sure as the candidate of game of the week. Tom Brady will be commentating this game for the 3rd time for the Cowboys, but this definitely has implications for game of the year. And when we quickly look back at last week for week 2, Lamar Jackson throwing 34 times in total, 21 completions. He also did throw an interception there, and he did have a sack. And then you have Dak throwing 39 times, and we'll highlight this a little bit further when we talk about what's going on with Dallas's run game problems. But 27 completions there. He actually played quite well compared to what the defense had let up. And he had 2 interceptions. I'm not going to put too much weight into that because that was quite a bit to do with where they were in the game and him forcing the ball. One of the interceptions to Brooks really fell, really great ball thrown, and that's going to get blamed on Dak. Second interception, he's forcing it to CD. Tyrann Mathieu able to pick him off. So that's a concern there as well. But with a new game, new week, let's see how they do. Both of these quarterbacks are giving up sacks. That's something I want to throw out there. We're going against 2 supposedly stout defenses that are playing poorly, but both of these D-lines should be able to get pressure, and they both should be able to attack the rest of the team. Now let's get into the specifics with our offensive and defensive breakdowns for both teams here. Welcome, NFL scientists. Let's go ahead and break down our Dallas offense versus our Baltimore defense for our Week 3 preview of Touchdown Labs Game of the Week. So we're going to go ahead and start off with our Dallas offense. Now, last year, Dallas started the season 16-0 at home. They broke that against the Saints last week. And let's see if they can continue to build on that streak. They honestly, before Mike McCarthy, Dallas never had a home field advantage. This is something that they've developed over the last 3 seasons. And coming off of a loss, they're 12-2. So not only do we speak about that adversity and attitude about the team, it seems like Mike McCarthy sort of instilled that in the Cowboys with them not coming off consecutive losses in quite some time. So that's another reason that I'm buying into Dallas beating Baltimore this week. They got embarrassed at home. They can't come off of another big loss like that. They've had 40 points scored on them at home now twice in a row. Something's got to give, right? So let's start with Dak Prescott. Now, my issue is not really with Dak, but my issue is with the people blocking for him. And you know what? Tyler Guyton's a rookie. Cooper Beebe's a rookie. Both of them are going to have growing pains when they're coming into the NFL season. It's what happens especially when you're on the offensive line. Now, growing pains is one thing. You got Tyler Guyton going up against Myles Flash Garrett during his first game of the year, probably the best defender in the NFL. Myles still had a strip sack on Guyton, and he was still able to attack Dak in the pocket. So, yeah, he's a first-round pick, but I don't think he's going to be able to, negate every single bad play from happening. And he's going up against Micah Parsons' teammate from Penn State, Odafe Oweh. Oweh is coming off a 2-sack-plus game. So that's something to watch out for. And it's not like on the other side at right tackle, Terrence Steele's doing any better. Terrence Steele's giving up a ton of pressures, and he's also coming off a terrible ACL injury that he had 2 years ago. And honestly, the Cowboys paid Steele coming off that injury, thinking that they're going to get a bargain. It hasn't looked like they've gotten that yet, and Steele still looks like he needs to come into form. So that'll be extremely interesting to watch. Now, here is another matchup that I want to highlight for you guys. Our rookie center, Cooper Beebe, going against Justin Madubuike. Justin Madubuike was just paid a huge, massive contract last year by Baltimore. This is going to be Beebe's biggest matchup of the year so far. He has not gone against a defensive tackle of Justin Madubuike's caliber, so I'll be very interesting to see how he plays. Cooper Beebe's, if you look at Pro Football Focus and any of these other statistics companies that kind of put out these stats, he's probably one of the better blockers and better centers throughout Week 1 and Week 2. I'm looking to see if he can continue that against top-tier competition. Another thing I want to highlight for Dallas here is they have a ton of running back problems. Rico Dowdle was leading the room with carries last week, only a few more carries than Zeke. He started the game. We didn't really see Zeke until the third series. Rico Dowdle is another version of Zeke with a little bit more explosiveness, and that's not really giving the Cowboys much. Zeke is going to be a great short yardage back. If you're a Cowboys fan and you think back to last season, you had Hunter Lipke at the goal line against the Miami Dolphins. He fumbled that there. If you have Zeke in that situation, he's likely going to get you the touchdown. They likely walk out of that Miami stadium with a win. Now, the only problem is, what are we doing here? Are we going to pass to run? Are we going to run to pass? Are we using our pass game as a de facto way to use our run game through screens and jet sweeps? I saw Week 1 that they were giving CeeDee Lamb a ton of jet sweeps out of the backfield. I'm not sure if that's because he was unprepared with the game plan because he had that holdout. But this is something to watch against Baltimore. The Cowboys can't be turning one-dimensional against these top-tier teams and having to pass 40 times. Puts a ton of pressure on Dak, a ton of pressure on that young offensive line, and these running backs aren't doing their job taking that pressure off. You have another guy, Deuce Vaughn here, who's kind of a change of pace back. I don't really see him doing much against the Ravens either. I was really hoping Jerry would go ahead and activate Dalvin Cook this week for this matchup, but it seems like he doesn't want to do that. Another area of concern that I'd like to highlight on is the Dallas Cowboys wide receiver depth. Jalen Brooks, he was throwing the ball last week. The game was still in hand. Likely, if the Cowboys score before half, it's still a game coming out of half and they have possession. Jalen Brooks slips. Great ball turns into an interception. Can Dak trust him again? That's my concern going into this week. We have CeeDee Lamb at number 1, Brandon Cooks at number 2. Who's our number 3? Jake Ferguson's hurt. He's usually, honestly, our number 2, and then you have Cooks at number 3. With Jake out and Schoonmaker getting most of these touches now with Span Ford, it really puts pressure on Dak to find that third and fourth receiver who he can trust. I know he built a ton of rapport with Tolbert last week, catching some difficult balls, so I'll look to see Dak and Tolbert kind of go through that connection as well and see if they can build on that this week against this strong, tough Baltimore Ravens defense. We're going to get into the Ravens defense in a second here. John Gruden actually talked about the Cowboys loving to run 21 and 22 personnel last week. They're having a struggle to do that right now. Ferguson's not in. They have no threat of a pass-catching tight end. Hunter Lipke, our fullback, was given about 10 snaps. So really, they're working with not much there in these personnels, and they're having to get into empty sets and shotgun sets in order for Dak to kind of play catch-up. It's making us very, very one-dimensional. A couple things I want to point out on the injury front for the Cowboys on offense. Jake Ferguson should be back, which will be a huge, huge boost to them. And John Stevens, he's been out for the first 2 weeks. John Stevens is someone the Cowboys see as their Isaiah Likely. He's a pass-catching tight end, former wide receiver converted to tight end. He has hands. Can he come in this week and be that third guy, that fourth guy that we need to catch a pass here or there? That's something I'll be looking to see if he's active. And Schoonmaker, who's our second-round tight end pick from 2 years ago, was active last week, and really that was because Jake was hurt and we had nobody else there. But he made some great catches. He made a great one-handed catch by a ball that Dak floated over him a little bit high. And let's see if Dak and Schoonmaker can kind of continue that connection this weekend at home as well against Baltimore. Now, I had this little graphic drawn up here, and really what this graphic is, I wanted to explain what the Saints were doing when we were dealing with them last week, and really what the Saints were doing on us. They have their 5 offensive linemen, and then they're putting a tight end here on one side. They're putting the running back up here to chip on Micah or a fullback, and really they are attacking our edges. Lots of times during the game last week, the Saints had an 8-man blocking front. That shows you how much they respected the Dallas Cowboys pass rush, but they really only had 2 wide receivers running. And lots of this focused on them getting to the edges. Stretch plays. Let's give Alvin Kamara the ball, block this up, run across from Micah Parsons' side. We want to avoid him, run to the other side, see what we can do. You do this over and over again after some successful plays. It tires out the defense. It opens up play action. Then you see Rashid Shaheed going for, a career day against the Cowboys, and you wonder why. They're supposed to have one of the better secondaries in the league. It's because they're taxing these edges here. They're taxing these edges with 8-man fronts, and when you're expecting run because it's working, you are bound to have your safeties come up and make a mistake. I wouldn't say last week was totally on Mike Zimmer, but I definitely want to say that there's a lot of pressure on the players right now in terms of effort. This effort showed up in Green Bay with a different head coach in Dan Quinn, and now this effort is showing up at home in a brand new season with a different head coach in Mike Zimmer. So something needs to be figured out here, and something to note is that the Cowboys have put Justin Phillips on IR. So defensive tackle that they traded from the Giants played extremely poorly last week. I'm not sure if that's the reason why, but it definitely goes food for thought. Now, let's get into Baltimore's defense here. Something I want to highlight. Baltimore is leading this game against the Raiders all week last week up until the fourth quarter. 10 fourth quarter points given up by the defense. And really, I'm kind of looking at Baltimore and I'm really disappointed. I don't know if it's coaching malpractice. I don't know if it's their offensive coordinator who's going away from the run. They have Derrick Henry and they're up 10 points in the fourth quarter and they still can't figure out how to close these games. They're still letting Max Crosby become a problem. The defense is allowing a league high 567 yards through the air. This is a matchup I'm looking for Dak and CeeDee Lamb to exploit. If Dak's going to come in here and try to throw the ball 35, 40 plus times during the game, this should be a team that they do it against, a team that's, giving up so many yards through the air. And not only are they giving up 567 yards through the air, the Baltimore Ravens defense is giving up 10 plus plays of 20 yards or more within the first 2 weeks. That is also the most in the NFL. So Dallas's defense and Baltimore's defense are probably touted to be, coming into the NFL 2024 season, one of the best two defenses, and they're both being extremely disappointing within the first 2 weeks of starting the season. A couple of players I want to point out here. Roquan Smith. Dak's going to have to go up to the line, walk up there, and check to see where Roquan is on the line for every single play. He's dealing with Cooper Beebe, like we said, going up against Justin Matabuke. It's his third NFL game. Not only is he going to have to go up against one of the top-tier defensive tackles in the NFL, he's going to have to be making these calls. And Dak's going to have to help him with that. He needs to identify where Roquan is at all times and make sure that Roquan's not being that lurker, sneaking up through the middle and being that spy, so he can pick off Dak in the middle of the field. Another thing I want to point out here as well is Nate Wiggins is questionable now going into this week. So Baltimore's secondary without Nate Wiggins, they would have Hallman starting in that CB2 spot. And that's going to put a lot of pressure and adversity on the Baltimore Ravens secondary. My question now is Humphries going to go ahead and guard CD one-on-one? Is he going to travel with him? Is this going to depend on Nate Wiggins being out? Is Hallman's assignment going to be one side of the field? All of this will kind of play itself out as we go on through the week and the injury report gets a little bit more solidified. But Humphries following CD is another matchup I want to look for, and I really don't think they will do that. And that'll leave CD to exploit them really throughout the secondary there on both sides of the field and in the slot. Like I said, Odafe is coming off a 2+ sack game versus the Raiders. He's going up against a struggling right tackle in Terrence Steele and an up-and-coming left tackle in Tyler Guyton, who's also in his third game in the NFL. So I'm expecting Odafe to take advantage of that and have some success, but the Cowboys need to be able to mitigate this with quick plays, the run game, and then once again, that leading into play-action passing. I've starred one player here. His name is Kyle Hamilton. This is probably one of the best safeties in the NFL right now. Kyle Hamilton can not only lock up your backfield, he can walk up to the line of scrimmage, walk up to Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, any of these top tight ends, cover them one-on-one. So this is my concern with this week. Yes, Jake Ferguson's coming back, but if he's back and Kyle Hamilton chooses to guard him, likely won't have too much success. And if he does, that's just another compliment to Jake Ferguson and how he's developing to be that pass-catching threat. But with Kyle Hamilton on this team, the Cowboys are going to need to focus on these things: our wide receiver depth and our third and fourth receiver. Are we able to get CD those carries and touches in the backfield so he can continue being successful into the jet sweep? He can continue kind of touching the ball and making plays when he's not guarded by Humphries. And then that second, third, and fourth wide receiver, whether that be Ferguson, Cooks, or Tolbert, can they go ahead and be effective on either Wiggins, who might be questionable, Hallman, or whoever they go ahead and put up there, possibly Kyle Hamilton, if it's Jake Ferguson. Perfect. Let's get right into it. Now we're going to go into our last segment that's going to discuss the Baltimore offense versus the Dallas defense. I think this is probably the biggest matchup out of the two. And the reason being is the Baltimore offense poses a little bit more of a threat right now, personally to me, than the Dallas offense would to the Baltimore defense. And there's a reason for that. And I'll go through some of these right now with you folks. So ranked number 7 in rushing, total rushing, is Baltimore. Now, you might think, yeah, of course they're ranked number 7. They have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. this isn't because of Derrick Henry. This is because Lamar Jackson, for the first 2 games, has really been forced to play hero ball. Lamar Jackson right now is averaging about 2 touchdowns a game, and he has to put the team on his back right now, even to come close enough to compete for a win. And for the first week against the Chiefs, which they had a very tough matchup, Lamar Jackson almost brought them back to going into overtime with a last-second play, but he's only able to put up 20 points on the board there. And then now going into Vegas here as well, he's only able to put up 23 points on the board then again. So something I want to point out about Baltimore's offense, these guys were leading 16-6 in the first half, and then 23-13 going into the fourth quarter, and then they lose. How do you go ahead and do that? That is coaching mismanagement. Lamar Jackson isn't able to close out these games, and I'm figuring out that this is something that's a common thread with him. Starting to think that Lamar Jackson isn't that guy. He has a 2-4 playoff record. He's 1-4 against the Chiefs. Yeah, sure, he's the unanimous MVP, but it's because his team is making him play hero ball for most of the matchup. Now, to go on and lead 23-13 and lose, they're 3 out of 11 on third downs. And I'm going to go ahead and blame this on our boy, Max Crosby. We're going to say AKA Mad Max. Max Crosby's out here making a name for himself. No, he doesn't want to be the top paid rusher in the NFL, but what he does want to do is be the best in the NFL, and that's what he's becoming. So if Max Crosby can go ahead and cause the Baltimore offense this many fits, I'm thinking that Mike Zimmer can get Micah Parsons to do the same thing, because not only do we have Micah Parsons on the left side of our line, we also have DeMarcus Lawrence there as well. And them as a tandem is probably one of the 2 better pass rushers in the NFL. So I am expecting Mike Zimmer and Mike McCarthy to take full advantage of that. I have here Derrick King Henry. The reason I want to bring this up is Derrick Henry really the king anymore? It seems like he's a little bit slow. It seems like he's a little bit taxed, working in overtime to try to get these yards that were given to him before. The Baltimore O-line, we've mentioned this a couple times in the video, 3 new starters on that O-line. Ronnie Stanley, big guy who's been banged up. He's actually one of the better pass blocking tackles right now in the NFL. But we're talking run blocking with Derrick Henry. And I don't think that Derrick Henry is the real problem here. I really do think it's Baltimore's issue on their offensive line. But what do you do 3 weeks into the season? You can't really fix that right now unless you're looking to trade. So I'm not too concerned about Baltimore's rushing attack. I'm more so concerned about Lamar Jackson's rushing threat and ability to make plays out of nothing. That's leading them to be the number 7 rushing ranked team in the NFL. So they have a terrible third down conversion rate right now. It's likely why they're 0-2. They're sitting at 40%. A lot of Baltimore fans are going to go ahead and argue and say that, Baltimore has one of the worst receiving cores in the NFL. And I don't agree with that. I think Baltimore has a great offense. You have Derrick Henry, one of the best backs in the NFL, unanimous MVP in Lamar Jackson, who's able to be a dual threat quarterback. You have Zay Flowers, who's picked in the top 20 of the first round. And really, I think Zay Flowers is a great explosive player who can not only play in the slot, but he can be effective outside as well. And that kind of shows with last week, 7 catches, 91 yards, 1 touchdown. Keep in mind that this is all happening in the first half. I saw him complain after the game and mention that he didn't get any targets in the second half, and it was potentially a reason that they lost. He's extremely frustrated, and there's a reason for that. Like I said, I'm starting to believe that Lamar's not that guy, and his processing abilities are leading him to lose these games. And for Zay Flowers to kind of pitch his point a little bit further, when you look at next-gen stats and you look at the separation leaders in the NFL right now, he's up there at number 2. So not only is Zay Flowers getting separation and being productive within even a first half of a game, he's complaining that he's not able to continue that and help his team win. And to be honest, I'd probably be saying the same thing. Wanted to point out Ronnie Stanley here as well. Used to potentially be a weak link on this line. Looks like his injury to his knee is causing him to, play a lot better now that he's had that time to rehab. So let's see if he can keep that up against this tough Dallas front that we'll get into right when we get into Dallas's defense. I kept this up here, and really what I wanted to focus on when I wrote this was draft and develop. Cowboys and Ravens are both teams to draft and develop their players. They both have the same philosophy when it comes to drafting. And if you look back into the last probably 2 decades in the NFL, the Cowboys, Packers, and Ravens have been the 3 most consistent drafting teams in the NFL. So very disappointed here with Dallas's defense. 19th in yards given up, 19th in scoring. So what does that mean? That means they're underperforming, and really that's because of a huge week 2 loss with them giving up a ton of yards. New Orleans almost scored on 6 straight possessions last week. So can Baltimore do the same thing? Can they force Dallas into a base defense? And I'll get into a little bit more detail about that later. When Dallas is forced into a base defense, they can't rush their passers. They can't do this double A gap blitz where they have Kendricks and Overshown or Leafau coming up on the line, and they still have their 4-man front here, and they have options to either go back, sweep around, come down. They weren't able to do that last week, and that's one of the key things that Mike Zimmer presents in this defense is this double A gap blitz with his linebackers, because the Saints were pressuring our edges so hard with these stretch plays. This didn't allow us to take advantage of that. So it'll be interesting to see if Baltimore can force Dallas into base again so they can attempt to take Dallas away from this double A-gap blitz they seem to do so well. That seems to be a staple in Mike Zimmer's defense. Another big thing that's come up in the last day or two is defensive tackle Jordan Phillips has gone to IR. And apparently he's re-aggravated a wrist injury. I'm not sure if that's the case. I'm going to be honest with you folks. Jordan Phillips was probably one of the worst players on the field last week when it came to playing the Saints. So maybe they want to clear up a roster spot. Maybe they want to pull up somebody else from another person's practice squad. That'll be an interesting thing to see as we kind of go throughout the week and see what happens with the elevations and whatnot that can happen towards Sunday. Spy. This is something I want to focus on now as well. Micah Parsons in his Edge podcast mentioned that Zim was talking to him about being a spy this game. I haven't really seen Micah do that during his time and tenure as a Cowboy. So if they want to go ahead and change his versatility so they can put him at a linebacker position and have him spy possibly with another edge rusher there holding the edge, I think it'll be very beneficial. We talked about how Baltimore is kind of one of the top-ranked rushing teams, not so much due to the personnel and Derrick Henry being there, but more so much with the threat of Lamar Jackson. So if Dallas can take that away with spying 11, that would be fantastic. If it's too much of a liability to put Micah on the second level and take him off that defensive line, I'll look to see if they can spy number 13, one of our other quicker and faster linebackers, Demarion Overshown, on Lamar Jackson. I think that'd be a great assignment for him this week. And I'll just jump down here into setting the edge. So really, this is where we had our big problem last week as a Dallas Cowboys defense. Weren't setting the edge. And what was happening was these edge defenders were penetrating way too deep into the offensive territory to the point where the running back is getting the ball, and by the time the edge defender's here, he's already has this lane because the edge defenders rush down way too far into the lane. So gap integrity is going to be super important here. For some reason, DeMarcus Lawrence's snap count's being significantly reduced. I saw Chauncey Golston out on the field quite a bit last week. He's only at 58% with 34 snaps. I'd like to see this increase, especially with the Baltimore Ravens defense coming in with this dangerous rushing attack. Another thing I want to point out here as well is Kalen Carson is going to potentially need to go up against Zay Flowers. Diggs typically doesn't travel when it comes to assignments. So we will rarely see Diggs, maybe once, twice, 3 times max in the year, where he will line up right against a receiver and follow him for the rest of the game. There's a problem when you do that with your number one cornerback. It forces everybody else on the defense to have to shift around. So if they want to move Zay Flowers into the slot, they want to move him to the outside, it causes the whole defense needing to shift in order for Diggs to accommodate for that and go cover him one-on-one. So I do think they're going to stay true to their game plan, keep him to the left side of the offensive field. That'll likely have Zay Flowers going into getting covered by Carson and Jordan Lewis, the boundary corner on the other side, and then our slot corner. So that'll be something interesting to watch. Carson was also only playing about half the game there with 33 snaps. I think the game got a little bit out of hand. They wanted to kind of throw some other folks out there, so that makes a little bit of sense to me. But I'd like that snap count to increase going into this week. Played a fantastic game against Amari Cooper, so I'd like to see him do that again against a different kind of receiver with Zay Flowers. Overshown is a huge question mark. A lot of Dallas Cowboys fans are looking and saying, why isn't Overshown being played more? And I'll be the first to tell you guys why Overshown isn't being played more. He had 18 snaps. If you probably go back and look at a third of them, 6 to 12, he's getting blown off by a second level blocker coming in, which is either a guard that's pulling through or, someone coming in from the line, getting their hands on him. He's not able to disengage. And Leafau, who's played 66% of the snaps, 39 snaps compared to Overshown's 18. When I did see Leafau out there, he was making tackles, he was finding his gaps, he was getting in lanes. So I would say that it's not really so much of a shot on the defense itself. It seems like they've decided that in base, they want Leafau out there. And then in our nickel package, they'll pull out Overshown. I expect to see this change and transform as the year goes on. And as Zimmer gets more comfortable with these folks, getting in their calls, getting their keys set, and making plays, I think we'll see Overshown snaps increase significantly from 31% going towards Leafau's 66%. And I'm going to harp on this point right here. Is there too much trust right now for the Dallas Cowboys and Mike Zimmer and Eric Kendricks? He is old. Like, he diagnoses extremely well, and he kind of reminds me of Sean Lee. He's a little bit of an older player, but has that instincts and has the skill to diagnose a play so he can get there and make up for his so-called lack of speed. But with these two new linebackers on our team, Leafau and Overshown, I have a feeling we might be putting Kendricks in some positions where he's getting overexposed. And we're not putting Leafau and Overshown in those positions because we don't trust them right now. So as the season goes on, I see that changing. And I think that'll do wonders for Kendricks as well, because it'll keep him more fresh and it'll help him make plays. He's already leading the league. He's second in the league with that one reception that he got week 1. Same with Diggs. So let's see if he can continue to make plays, hopefully come up with another Lamar Jackson interception this week. And really the last point that I want to focus on right here is Donovan Wilson. I saw Donovan Wilson. I'm not sure if it was Donovan Wilson or Malik Hooker. One of them was getting burned over and over and over again. And this could have been because Carson wasn't passing his assignment correctly. It could have been because Hooker wasn't communicating with Donovan Wilson. Something is going on there in the back end. And these safeties are getting mixed up. Hooker's speed isn't there from when he's backpedaling to catch these speedy receivers. So Zay Flowers is that guy. He can take you down the field. I really need the Dallas Cowboys to shore up that safety position and even possibly put Wanye Thomas out there or Marquise Bell for a couple of reps just to see what they can give us. I think Donovan Wilson has his place on the team as a hard hitter, but in order for him to cover the field like they're expecting him to, I just think he's out of place for that, and that's not where he strives. So, guys, this was a fantastic breakdown from your mad scientist. Thank you so much for watching our game breakdown for the Dallas Cowboys versus the Baltimore Ravens on Touchdown Labs this week. We're going to go ahead with our prediction. I'm going to predict that Dallas wins this game 27-23. It's a hard-fought battle, but Lamar Jackson just can't put enough points on the board, and Dallas's defense comes through, and they show everybody why they should be a top 5 defense in the NFL. Thanks so much for watching. Touchdown Labs out.